Question is that the words proposed to be omitted stand part of the question, and I call the honourable member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm going to start by attempting to use the chamber as it's meant to be used as a debating chamber. Unfortunately, the member for Bowman has left, because what I want to do is just respond to some of the comments he made in his stream of consciousness, including a challenge, as I understood it, to Labor members of the parliament to find a job seeker unhappy with the COVID supplement. It's a strange challenge, really, because of course we accept that people who are on job seeker are happy that there's a COVID supplement for two reasons. One is people who are on job seeker, or as it was known before Newstart, before COVID, now have money that's enough to have something more like a life of dignity and be above the poverty line. So of course they're happy about the COVID supplement. And the second point is that those people who were employed before COVID hit but lost their jobs, some of whom have never had to be on unemployment benefits before in their lives, are happy that there's a COVID supplement because they're getting a rate of unemployment benefit that allows them to live a life of something like dignity above the poverty line. No one on this side of the chamber is saying that the COVID supplement hasn't been successful, or that some of the measures that the government have put in place during this time haven't been successful. We argued for them. We negotiated them. We got them extended to people who had been left out initially by this government. The member for Bowman should know that, given he's been here in this parliament during this year. But he also asked if we'd ever spoken to a taxpayer. I speak to taxpayers in my electorate all the time, and I'll tell you who I'm speaking to in my electorate are people who have been taxpayers their entire life and because of the global pandemic have found their family business has been smashed or have lost their job. Or like Mark from my electorate, who is in a wheelchair and after many years of unemployment found a job that he loved and was good at and held for 18 months and earned 40% of the household's income and was retrenched at the start of COVID and can't find another job and is petrified that at the age of 56 he will never be employed again. He doesn't want to go on the disability support pension. He doesn't want to have to go on job seeker, be it at $40 a day or with the COVID supplement. He wants to work, but he doesn't qualify for the wage subsidy that the government introduced in the budget, and the restart wage subsidy that the Treasurer has tried to say is looking after older workers has been an unmitigated failure, we've found out through estimates. Mark wants to work. They're the people I'm talking to. I'm talking to people in my electorate of Dunkley who are feeling desperately the impact of the fact that in January of this year we had 4,572 people who were receiving Newstart and 459 young people on youth allowance, and in October of this year we've got 10,277 people on job seeker, which would have been Newstart, more than double. And we've got 1,085 young people on youth allowance, more than double. They're the people I'm talking to. And I can tell the member for Bowman and this chamber that the people I'm talking to can't believe that they are facing the prospect in March of next year, if they cannot find a job in a jobs market where there are at least 7 applicants for every available job, of the job seeker allowance reverting back to the base rate of $40 a day. And it's easy enough for people on the other side of the chamber to take cheap shots at us over here on the Labor side because we're standing up for people who need help. It's easy enough for the member for Bowman to call us opportunistic because right now, at the time of almost the greatest need in Australia in a century, with a recession and a global pandemic, we are standing up and saying this is the opportunity to increase allowances for people so that they can live above the poverty line, so that they can live a life of dignity, so that they can feed their family, pay their rent and afford to get on public transport to go and apply for a job or to go to a job interview. Or they can put petrol in their car. Or they can go and buy a second-hand suit so they can go to a job interview. This debate shouldn't be ideological because it's about people. And also because we know that many of the groups that would previously have said don't increase the rate of unemployment benefits because it's a disincentive to work, are now joining with the groups that are looking at it from the social welfare side and saying increase it so that people can live lives of dignity, and saying to this government the base rate of unemployment payments is not good enough. But yet this piece of legislation gets rid of the COVID supplement that the member for Bowman was rightly praising because it has worked, and apparently that's a reason to get rid of it in March next year, when no one thinks we'll be out of this recession. The RBA, the Business Council of Australia, the Retailers Association, community groups and economists across the spectrum support an increase in the base rate of unemployment payments. And yet we have before us a piece of legislation that in some respects holds unemployed people hostage because it allows COVID supplements and other improvements to the social security system that this government has brought in during the year as positives in the bill, at the same time as saying unemployed people will lose the COVID supplement and go back to $40 a day. If you vote against the legislation, some people will miss out. If you vote for the legislation, other people will miss out. What a government. What a government to do that to the people who are most vulnerable in their time of need that it should be representing. So don't accuse us of playing politics. Don't accuse us of being opportunistic. This government wrote the book on those things. Last week, I held the second Dunkley Community Question Time, where I asked members of my community to email me, Facebook me, contact me with the questions that they would like asked in the parliament, if only they could get them asked. Deb from Seaford would like to know, why does the government not consider that people on JobSeeker over 64 who are not likely to find consistent work again after being made redundant need support? Deb has said it's quite demoralising to be in this position at this time of life. There was support for under 35s in the budget, but more thought and care should be invested in looking out for the over 60s who have been made redundant and face greater challenges in finding employment again. And Deb is absolutely right, and I've spoken about this in this parliament before, and I will continue to speak about it until this government looks at an employment program for workers over the age of 50 that actually helps them get back into employment, because we know if you lose your job over the age of 50, it is nigh on impossible to find another one, and it's harder for women than for men. But this year's budget did nothing to help that, and this piece of legislation will do nothing to help it. Marilyn wrote to me and said she would like to know, how do we get politicians to be accountable for their policies that do harm to the public? Well, if anyone's been following the absolute scandal of robo-debt and unlawful debt notices being issued to the most vulnerable people in our society, and a government having to make $1.2 billion in payout to avoid going to trial and being exposed for exactly how culpable they are, we'll know it's pretty hard at the moment to keep government politicians accountable for their policies that do harm to the public. And Marilyn also wanted to know, how do we get JobSeeker raised to a livable level? Vote Labor, Marilyn, because it's not going to happen in a permanent way under this government when you listen to the contributions that are made on the other side of the chamber, when you hear someone describing cutting unemployment benefits back to $40 a day as tapering. It's not going to happen under this government to have a proper increase to the base rate of unemployment benefits so that people can afford to look for a job. Vote Labor. 1 in 5 people in Dunkley are on a pension. Disability support pensioners, age pensioners, carers, people who are spending their lives working to look after people who are their friends and their family who can't care for themselves. And they have just been abandoned by this government. I have had constituents say to me that the government's $250 payment before Christmas and another $250 payment after Christmas for aged care pensioners feels like a slap in the face, that it's almost an insult. Don't they know what electricity costs are? Don't they know how hard it is to pay your rent or your mortgage when you're on a pension? Don't they know how much private health insurance is, how much food costs? It would seem that they don't. The member for Bowman invited us to talk to our constituents. I invite him to go and talk to his constituents. Perhaps he'll give another speech next time when he does. A number of my Labor colleagues will talk about the evidence that has been presented to the Senate inquiry into this legislation and others that debunks the idea that increasing the base rate of unemployment benefits from $40 a day is somehow rather a disincentive to work. And it's really important, so I'm going to talk about it as well. Professor Boland told that Senate committee that even before COVID, he would have thought, as many others have expressed, that there were strong arguments for making a permanent increase in the New Start, now job seeker payment. What COVID has done is to give us a stronger evidentiary basis for thinking that you could make that permanent increase without having significant adverse effects on the incentives to find work. The research that he has done has made a couple of main findings. And I quote, one is that you could have a substantial increase in job seeker without adversely affecting incentives to take up paid work. Secondly, with the COVID-19 supplement to job seeker, we have had in 2020 an experiment, if you like, on what the effect on incentives to find work would be of a higher rate of job seeker, and my evaluation of the evidence is that there is no evidence that the higher level of job seeker during 2020 with the supplement has had any appreciable effect on incentives to take up paid work for the people who are receiving it. The Australian Retailers Association, not known as a lefty socialist organisation, it's fair to say, have said to the committee social security recipients spend an estimated 58% of their payments on retail goods or services at supermarkets, convenience stores, pharmacies, merchandise stores, small businesses. The scheduled end of the job seeker payment will take an equivalent of $8.5 billion per year from the retail sector. The equivalent of 130,000 Australian retail jobs are also on the line if we return to the rate of the job seeker payment to its old base rate. Next time any member of the Morrison government talks about their focus on jobs and their focus on the economy, remember that evidence. $8.5 billion per year from the retail sector and the equivalent of 130,000 Australian retail jobs on the line. It's good for people, it's good for the economy. Raise the base rate of the unemployment benefits. And I'd just like to finish my contribution to say something on behalf of and to the amazing public servants who have worked at Centrelink for many years, who have written to me. A constituent has said, we all feel that we are also owed an apology. Staff spoke up at the first instance about robo-debt. They didn't believe it was right and they were told that it was going to happen, and if they didn't like it, they should leave and find other employment. When they say first instance, under this government, not the fairy tale that the minister's been talking about in question time of 1994. Centrelink staff have dealt with anger, desperation, despair and frustration, and they know why, because they were forced to implement decisions that weren't right and weren't accurate. They deserve an apology. I can't give them an apology on behalf of this government, but I can say thank you and we appreciate you.
The honourable member's time has expired.